Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody to the Ronin Institute Public Seminars. This is our first one, so thank you very much for joining us. If you're unfamiliar with the Ronin Institute, it is an institute that is dedicated to supporting and facilitating high quality scholarship by independent and non-traditional scholars. And we aim to build a more efficient, creative, and humane model of academia. I'm Arika Virapongse. I am a Ronin Institute research scholar, and I'm also the community director. And I'm pleased to have Martin Bohle with us, who is also a Ronin Institute research scholar. He will be presenting about foundations and examples for how to tackle geoethical dilemmas. In the meantime, if you have any questions, he's going to give a presentation that will last about 45 minutes. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, if you could just put them in the chat. Towards the end of the seminar, then we'll have an opportunity to open up the floor for questions. And also note that we are recording the seminar. It's only going to record, we're going to record just the presentation so that we can also post it publicly afterwards. And so then we'll have that available for you to see. So just to introduce Martin, he has 30 years of practice in managing European research programs. He's a physical oceanographer by training. Now that he's retired, he devotes himself to the societal context of the geosciences, for fun, out of passion, and for necessity, because he is conscious that the lifetime achievement of his generation is anthropogenic global change. And to quote Martin, he says, "Welcome to the Anthropocene, we made it." But he adds, "Welcome to the noosphere, we need it." And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Martin.
Okay, welcome. I'm happy to have the chance to give this presentation to you. I will now move to it, and I hope that the technique works. Okay, welcome everybody. So today I'd like to talk about foundations, examples, how to tackle geoethical dilemmas. This is the opening screen. This talk was foreseen for a conference in India in March this year, but which was stopped in the track by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'd like to thank my friends and colleagues Sylvia and Eduardo, because there's quite a considerable amount of their material which I am presenting here today. So, in case that I lose you, please here's your take-home quandary. Ethical dilemmas, the real and the true ones, are situations in which there is a choice to be made between two or more options, neither of which resolves the situation in an ethical, acceptable fashion. However, we cannot walk away from that situation. We have to tackle it. And that's in the end what I would like to illustrate a little bit what that means from a geoethical perspective, so things on which I'm working currently with friends and colleagues. So, give you a little bit a preparatory narrative about elements of context to which I have to refer. First, I would like to talk here about less than satisfying circumstances. So don't expect any clear-cut, simple answer, maybe some indications how to move forward. When I refer to the human niche, I think about the planetary network of cultural and natural landscapes which we are building and bundling by our global supply chains, which we restlessly alter, be it through engineering, production, or consumption. In that context, Geosciences studies the human niche from an Earth-centric perspective. Within geoscience, geoethics is an emerging field which explores the cultural substrates to support sense-making and action of human agents. Initially, that means a decade, a little bit more ago, geoethics was conceived for geoscientists, that is, for the professional functions in various societal contexts. Subsequently, that evolved, and now we have wider focus thinking about citizens when interacting with the Earth systems. And I will end my presentation bringing in a bit of my own work, combining geoethics with some works of two philosophers of the last century, which leads to something which I call the geoethical rationale, which is namely a call to act agent-centric, rich equals focused, responsibility-focused, knowledge-based, all agent-inclusive, and university rights-based. I hope at the end of the talk that you have a small idea what that implies. So, to start with a bit of theory and experience, what does mathematical theory and experience teach about limits of proofs? Simple question, or not so simple question, does any problem has a scientific, logical, and virtuous solution? Experience tells us the answer is no, and theory tells us the answer is no. That is the famous Gödel theorems, which about limits of provability, which basically says if you have a consistent formal system, for example, a scientific method, for example, a mathematical theory, for example, a set of ethical rules, then there are statements which are true, but which you cannot prove within the system. You have to go beyond it, building something wider. Continue with a suite of remarks, a little bit of an introduction. So an ethical dilemma, as we already said, is an alternative between two options, which none brings us to a satisfying solution. You have a conflict between ethical duties, and if you follow one, you have to violate the others. There is no satisfying answer to it. In geosciences, and so narrowing the scope, there are geoethical dilemmas which geoscientists have to answer in their professional context. And we have a number of questions. Can we solve the problem, the dilemmas which we face? What to do if we cannot? And what should we do in that circumstances? Normally, a geoscientist makes choices that is try to look for best consequences, at least the less worst of a decision to be taken. Sometimes consequences must be carefully evaluated, and even bad consequences must be carefully evaluated and even accepted. Then the question arises, who has to take the final decision to accept bad consequences? And definitely it is not the duty of the geoscientist itself to take the decision about geoethical dilemmas. If we go to practitioners, people in the field, they quite often have their codes of practice, of their professional organizations, and these deontological theories may say, okay, don't care much about the consequences, at least if you comply with the contract. That's not for everybody a comfortable situation. Saying, okay, I follow the rules of my profession, however, the outcome is not what I feel is right to be done. And that means in practice, we should not confuse the ethics of responsibility with the ethics which is embodied in a given tool. Therefore, I think it's a good case to claim when we are confronted with the geoethical dilemma, one should think about Gödel's theorem, namely to find a wider system in which one could get the answer to what the problem is, what is in front of us. And we have in that context, seen through Gödel's theorem, to understand that a corpus of science, here geoscience, is our systems of rules in which we make judgment, and by definition it is limited and does not allow to give comprehensive answers. Then the other practitioners which ask more the question, okay, when we are in front of these geoethical problems, what is our professional duties? So I think first one is to see in our trades, we have to accept that we are limited to offer options and scenarios. And we shall explain what are possible choices and consequences. And we have to accept that geoscience is only a limited science within a wider sense, and we cannot give universal answers. However, we have to justify decisions from a scientific and technical point of view, indicating pros and cons, and also indicating societal and environmental terms, what they are, and analyze the probabilities that they occur and what are related uncertainties, which is itself already relatively complex task. So, give you a little example. I think everybody has an idea of what mining is. So getting some coal, some core, some gold, and some other minerals out of the ground. And everybody knows more or less that it's full of an enterprise, full of problems and full of geoethical dilemmas. At least in a part of this world, we can say we have a process to mining which minimizes environmental impacts. It's not everywhere the place, but in many places, but it's not necessarily so the case for social impact. In that context, good practices for a sustained and a sustainable mine development requires that the collaboration with the host community concerned goes into a social license to operate. So that is in the end a process in order to handle the ongoing dilemmas. Imperfect, a process over time, is open-ended, is not once granted forever, but it is an outcome of an evolving process in which we have to bring the communities on board, including their evolving needs. So, to dig a little bit deeper into what are problems to face, let's construct an example which is, at least to my taste, is very interesting. So what's the geological timescale quandary, a case study? We're starting from the inside, which we do not question, that the human activity has altered the dynamics of the Earth system. Okay. If that is the starting point, then as geoscientists, we may come up to the conclusion that naming the current times Holocene is not sufficient to characterize the altered state of the Earth system. So the action which is concretely proposed is to amend the geological timescale to add the epoch Anthropocene to its end. That is the so-called GTS amendment. If one has a first look on what is there proposed, within a scientific discipline, it looks very much like an intra-geoscience proposal, just adjusting a scientific method, how we structure the geological time. However, and if you follow a little bit the discussions in many disciplines which go around this notion, Anthropocene, it is far from being innocent. In the end, it is a statement about the human condition. Simply saying, okay, we all together, 7 billion people on this globe, the way how we're working and living, we are changing this globe. So we have a statement which is, on one side, looks like inter-geoscience, and on the other side is certainly a strong extra-geoscience component. So how that could evolve. So certainly, geoscientists who are studying how the Earth functions have a societal responsibility because of the corpus of expertise that they can offer. From that corpus of expertise derives the responsibility to give truthful messages to societies. For example, that what goes through calling the ongoing times Anthropocene. As I said, since more than a decade, geoscientists debate this question, whether and how to do this amendment and how it might be accommodated within the method to establish the geological timescale. So, in that debate, the key issue is the methodological rigor, so that a scientific method is not modified in order to achieve a certain outcome, which is a very valuable and very important element of modern science. And it took several centuries to get that on board and have this deeply enshrined in the scientific process. So, bringing geoethics into the picture, within the geoethics thinking, there's something which is called the geoethical promise, as a kind of Hippocratic oath of geoscientists. It proposed a set of 9 normative statements to guide sense-making actions. And of these 9, 6 apply to the GTS amendment. Very nicely, the first 3 say, give the order, the instructions, the guide, the advice. Please give a truthful message to society because that is your professional responsibility. And the other 3 said, okay, never touch the scientific method. It is not to be compromised to achieve a common outcome. So if we schematize that problem, it brings us to this screen. So from the left, we have an insight. The Earth system has altered. We have an action to amend the geological timescale. And then the first question we have to tackle: can we, using the existing corpus of methods of geoscientists, the chronostratigraphy, can we say, okay, yes, we have changed the state of the Earth? So if we can say yes, okay, then we can go to the next point saying, okay, let's say, do we like to approve the GTS amendment? And then not for innocently, I say, like. Because many of the debates which going on reflect a certain way of viewing the world, but the discussions are around the question, are the methods of chronostratigraphy are correctly applied? So if they are not applied and we go to accepting the GTS amendment, then definitely we violate part of the statements in the geoethical promise. So we tweak the scientific method in order to get a certain outcome. So if we apply rigorously the method, and we should then say, okay, times have changed, but we don't like to say it, then we violate another group of set of the geoethical promise. So what to do now? Should we adjust the method? Don't compromise them. Should we adjust the geoethical promise? However, that's a method too. So it would again violating the basic features of science that we don't tweak methods in order to get a certain outcome. What makes now things interesting is the question, is there at least conceptually an escape from that quandary? So to recall, experience teaches when a given method leads to confusing results, then a remedy may be found going beyond the framework of the given method. So the geological timescale is a given method to interpret the stratigraphic record, a set of scientific procedures. Also, geoethical promise is a given method to guide actions. However, the geological timescale includes at least one specific feature that has no geological meaning. That's the 0 point from which the years of the past are counted, wherever the 0 point is placed in the recent historical past. So, in order to handle that quandary, one conceptual possibility is that, okay, let's take this one free element.
Martin, I think we've lost your sound. We lost your sound for just maybe 10 seconds.
I'm back?
You are back.
Okay, I don't know why. I didn't touch anything. Okay, so the last second. So I go to the beginning of this slide again. Is that okay? Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
So I in rehearsal, experience teaches when a given method leads to confusing result, a remedy might be found going beyond the framework of the given method. In the example here, the way how the geological timescale is defined and how the geoethical promise is conceived. Both are methods in the scientific sense. Now, the way out may be that the geological timescale includes at least one specific feature that has no geological meaning, that is the 0 point in time from which we count the years backward, and where this 0 point is placed in the recent past. So what one may think about, okay, let's take that element and we keep the corpus of methods which we have to identify the geological past up to that point. And then there is something new from that point onward. Going further, from such elements of examples, let's look a little bit more from a more helicopter perspective on what are ethical dilemmas of the citizen professional geoscientist. Geoscientists act in 3 different spheres. They're doing science, developing technology, and applying its knowledge in a societal context in a professional manner. Next, any geoscientist is also a citizen. Hence, she or he is situated in different societal contexts. So what happens when we're confronting ethical dilemmas across the 4 spheres? We need a little element of theory. First, I think we need a method to gauge what we understand as societal context. There are different choices possible. My and Eduardo's choice is that we go to Kohlberg's ideal types of moral adequacy, which are described here on this slide. So that is a way how to schematize different forms of societal context. So when we look again on these ethical dilemmas of the citizen professional geoscientist, we can distinguish between science, technology, and profession. The left side of the screen, we can look what are the main goals, what are the typical actions, what are possible products, what are types of tools and results, and what is a metric of success. So, ethical dilemmas of geoscientists certainly reflect have one basic feature. They appear as conflicts between their professional duties and their convictions as citizens. Geoscientists, as citizens, acting as citizens, must explain what makes their interprofessional decisions justified, given the impacts on natural and social environments. We had the example for mining. We had the big example that I would like to call the given times Anthropocene. Now, a next element of theory, that is Jonas' work on imperative of responsibility from the 1980s, which is a way of thinking which we, in modern terminology, we would, for example, call as intergenerational justice. So we think, for example, of climate change and we putting the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the future has to suffer about it. Jonas has developed his ideas around biotechnology in the 1980s, and basically is the statement of those who conceive a certain technology, those who apply this technology to the in a given societal context, so make it working, make it happening, have responsibility for the technology for today and also for the future. So when I try now to bring these different elements together, so looking for a rationale for handling geoethical dilemmas, let's recall, first important element for me is geoscience co-shapes the human niche. The human niche, as said in the beginning, is the planetary network of natural and cultural environments. So, in a sense of Jonas' imperative of responsibility, geoscientists, because they make technology applicable in our world, are responsible for their future use. Geoethical thinking, second recall, we look into cultural substrates that nurture the skills of human agents and the operational circumstances that they encounter in the human niche. So I think we can combine Goldberg's and Jonas' work with what geoethics has over the last decade proposed so far, and formulate something which I like to call a geoethical rationale, namely 6 normative preferences to be agent-centric, to be virtuous focused, to be responsibility focused, to be knowledge-based, all actor inclusive, and universal rights-based. To add a little bit of substance to that, agent-centric means to apply normative frameworks that invest into the empowerment of the individual or group to act to their best understanding in face of the given circumstances, opportunities, and purposes. So it is about you, it's about us as group, and it's even about our institutions to put them in the center, who are the actor, who cannot shy away that they have to do certain things in front of the difficulties which we are. Virtually focus means to have a corpus of personal traits, for example, honesty, integrity, transparency, reliability, a spirit of sharing, cooperation, reciprocity, of the individual or group that furthers operational, so handling of things, and social capabilities, so handling of people, of the individual and the group. There's certainly much flaw in this statement, but this is the best what I think we can get so far. Responsibility focus means to have an outcome of a normative call, either external by somebody calling on you, or internal when you reflect about yourself, about the individual and group that frames a decision and acts in terms of accountability, as well for the intended effects as for the unintended consequences and implications for future generations. Knowledge-based, that means on first and foremost instance, that geoscience or Earth system knowledge acquired by scientific methods. Scientific methods is the key element to what we understand as knowledge-based. Experience-based knowledge is a secondary knowledge source. So not to ignore, but key is for both the reproducibility of knowledge by third parties. What is the core to the scientific method? So there is a method, independent who applies them, can check my claim, and if work is done properly, two persons of very different individuality, of very different beliefs, of very different value systems should come to the same results. And that is the key element of being knowledge-based, in opposite to what is illusion to face or authorities. All actor inclusive. Here it goes back to what is the best available practice to my understanding, that of shared social license to operate. Individual. It means various individuals and groups come together, differentials of power, voice, and so forth have to be mitigated by using participatory processes and process of capacity building. And finally is the right space guiding effective and rational sense making of the individual and groups, their universal, parentheses open, human, parentheses closed, rights. For example, life, liberty, justice, to strengthen on that basis secondary normative constructs such as utilitarian, sustainability, or precautionary principles. The word human is in brackets because that is one of the forefronts of the thinking which I am following currently is, do we think about universal rights or do we think about universal human rights? So what is about the rights of non-human living being? Is there a concept possible and useful to apply of rights of even abiotic beings? So far, what is as tool available to handle geoethically dilemmas, from which we cannot walk away, we simply have to tackle them. Here, some useful references, and I'd like to thank you for your attention.